Welcome to the September edition of What's in Bloom at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. So each month we select an assortment of plants that are in bloom in that particular month, and we make a sheet that we hand out to our visitors at the garden. And so we're going to walk you through the September version. So we start out with Trichostema Midnight Magic. So Trichostema is a genus in the mint family, Lamiaceae, and well known for the species Trichostema lanatum, woolly blue curls, which is a prominent California native. And this is a hybrid of that. So it blooms over a longer period of time, and it's actually easier to grow than Trichostema lanatum is. Really stunning how many flowers it has, and over months of time. Trichostema Midnight Magic. Okay, our next plant on this month's What's in Bloom is a tree, and this is Brachychiton discolor. So we're used to family shufflings and so on in the world of botany, and this tree has changed from originally being in the Sterculia family to now being in the Malvaceae, or the hibiscus family. So it's really not that far of a reach, because Sterculiaceae in any case was close to Malvaceae when they were considered separate families, and now they're united. So the Brachychitons are from Australia, and we have several other Brachychitons here at the Bancroft Garden. But this one it has really had an amazing year this year. It tends to drop a lot of leaves before it flowers, and it dropped a huge number of leaves this spring and has been flowering ever since. So it's been on What's in Bloom for several months in a row here, but still going strong. And the flowers are kind of fuzzy brown at the bud stage, and then opening up with this bubblegum pink inside. Really an extraordinary flower, and it just keeps on coming. Brachychiton discolor. We call our monthly list of plants What's in Bloom, and mostly it is blooms that we feature on the list. But however, sometimes a plant has colorful fruits, and that's the case here with this palm. This is Butia capitata, the jelly palm, and it has wonderful colorful fruits. They start out green and then turn yellow to yellow-orange as they ripen, and it's really making quite a lot of fruits this year. It's called the jelly palm because they use the fruits to make jelly, but you can also just eat them straight off the tree, and we do feature them on our fruit tasting tour when we have our fall fruit tasting tours. Butia capitata. Here we have a plant in the Acanthaceae, or acanthus family, and this is Justicia californica. It has different color forms. It could be orange or red, but this yellow form has a cultivar named Tecate Gold. It's a delightful dry-growing shrub with blue-green stems and little arrow-shaped green leaves and these tubular yellow flowers. Justicia californica, Tecate Gold. In the summertime, we have lots of agaves that come into flower at the Ruth Bancroft Garden, so we feature them on a lot of the What's in Bloom sheets in July and August, and even here in September, this one is still going. This is a hybrid between Agave ornithobroma, which is a seldom grown small agave from northwestern Mexico, and Agave xylonacantha, much more commonly grown and from eastern Mexico. So the hybrid has quite narrow leaves, and like other agaves, a tall spire of flowers that works its way from the bottom on upward. So this one's working its way up towards the sky. The flowers are kind of greenish with some yellow at the mouth, and then these long exerted stamens with the yellow pollen protruding from the flower. This is not a commonly seen plant, but I think it's quite delightful. Agave ornithobroma x xylonacantha. Sometimes I like to sneak in a plant here and there that's not actually on the What's in Bloom list, but is pretty extraordinary. And so that's the case here. This is Stapelia variegata is the old name, and Orbia variegata is the new name. It's one of the stapeliads. So stapeliads, or carrion flowers, are a remarkable group, mostly from Africa, and they have a wonderful pollination strategy. And that is, they emit a foul odor that attracts flies who think maybe there's a dead body or something exciting going on. And it's all a ruse. There is no dead body, but when the flies come and stop in at the flower, they pollinate it in the process. And these have flowers kind of like starfishes with 5 points and all kinds of wonderful textures and speckles and patterns, and really quite extraordinary. We didn't put it on What's in Bloom because we weren't sure how continuous the blooming would be, but the flowers really are extraordinary and worth showing you. Orbia variegata. Here we have another agave, Agave lophantha from northeastern Mexico. It's actually a close relative of one of the parents of the previous hybrid we looked at, Agave xylonacantha. Lophantha is an easy to grow plant, and we've had it in the garden forever, have multiple forms of it. And this one's actually flowering later than any of the others. It's got a blue-green stalk and then greenish yellow flowers. And like other agaves, works its way upward, and you can see it's roughly at the midpoint of its blooming now. Agave lophantha. Well, continuing with our agave theme, here we have a dwarf agave from southern Mexico, Agave isthmensis. So the name isthmensis means coming from the isthmus, and the isthmus it's talking about is the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, which is the narrowest point in Mexico, near the border between Oaxaca and Chiapas. And so that's being so narrow there, you can drive from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean in a matter of hours. So it's well known for that. And here is a little dwarf agave that comes from there, Agave isthmensis. And it oftentimes does form a clump, but ours has stayed a single and gone all the way to flowering as a single plant. And that means there will be no continuance of it, because if it doesn't make any pups, then there's nothing to continue with. The mother plant will die, and that'll be the end of it. But anyway, it's a charming little agave with this inflorescence that doesn't really go straight up. It kind of wanders to the side a bit, and little clusters of flowers at the ends of the slender branches. This is not quite open yet, so we're going to show you some pictures of it last time it bloomed to show you what the open flowers look like. Agave isthmensis. Well, on to the Asphodelaceae. The asphodel family includes the aloes, and this one is Aloe karasbergensis. The Karasberg is a mountain range in southern Namibia, and this aloe occurs there as well as across the border in the northwestern part of South Africa. It's really a beautiful aloe with very wide leaves, lacking teeth along the edge, and prominent stripes along the leaves. It will flush a little bit of violet in enough sun, and has these pinkish heads of tubular flowers, sort of like an umbrella over the plant. And this has bloomed for us in various months of the year, but most often at this time at the end of summer. Aloe karasbergensis. Okay, this beautiful palm tree is Brahea armata, the Mexican blue palm. It's a Baja California native, and when Ruth planted it here, it didn't have any trunk at all. So you can see over the last 50 years it's grown to be quite a towering palm, notable for its bluish leaves and its long cascading clusters of flowers that extend out from the rosette of leaves and dangle downward. You can see also the strands of old inflorescences with the fruits on them from last year's flowering. Brahea armata. This plant is Russelia equisetiformis. And Russelia used to be in the family Scrophulariaceae, and there is a closely related family called Plantagenaceae, and recent DNA evidence has forced us to realign which genera are put into which family. And so this has moved from its old home in the Scrophulariaceae to its new home in the Plantagenaceae, but little does it know. It's still going along, behaving as it always has. Russelia equisetiformis. It's quite a wonderful plant because of the way that the stems cascade over and have these beautiful bright red tubular flowers, and it just keeps on flowering and flowering all summer long and into the fall. Russelia equisetiformis. Here we have a hybrid aloe, one of many yellow-flowered aloe hybrids that I've made over the years. And its parents are both from South Africa. So one of them is Aloe buhrii, which has either yellow or orange flowers and is a western South African plant from the winter rainfall zone. And the other is Aloe striata, which has coral or orange flowers and comes from farther east. This one, I chose one of the seedlings that had a yellow flower because that's what I was aiming for. But it's really a wonderful plant because it tends to rebloom. And so here we have one flower that's going now and another one that's on the way. So there's a continuance of the blooming period. It does make a small clump over time, and this one has 5 heads by now, but that's after many years. Aloe buhrii striata. As I mentioned, sometimes we feature plants with colorful fruits on our What's in Bloom list, in addition to those that have flowers. And that's the case here. This is Opuntia ficus-indica. It's the most commonly cultivated of the prickly pears and comes from Mexico, but widely grown for both its edible pads and its edible fruits. So here we see the fruits on display. They could be different colors. This is a red fruited one, but there are also ones with yellow or orange fruits. Quite delicious, but you don't want to just pick them right off the plant and eat them because they've got little tiny spines that'll embed themselves in your finger if you do that. So you've got to carefully de-spine them first before you eat them. But quite delicious once you go to that trouble. The pads are generally harvested when they're new. And when they're new and first coming out, they have little tiny leaves on them. And at that stage, they're quite tender and can be cooked. They oftentimes will cook it in stir fries or in omelets or what have you. So a very useful plant in addition to being beautiful, Opuntia ficus-indica. Echeverias are members of the Crassulaceae, also known as the stonecrop family. This is a family that occurs around the world, but it has some wonderful representatives in Mexico, like this one. The species from which this was bred is called Echeveria gibiflora, and it's common in southern Mexico. You find it in the mountains south of Mexico City and in several other states as well. And sometimes the plants have a little bit of waviness at the leaf edge. So hybridizers have really worked with that to exaggerate that trait and come up with these amazing plants that look almost like ornamental cabbages. So this particular cultivar is called Echeveria Lace. The genus Gasteria belongs to the asphodel family, and it's a close relative of Aloe. But it's a much smaller genus and more localized in its distribution. So almost all the Gasterias come from South Africa. The couple of exceptions just spill over into adjacent countries, whereas the genus Aloe runs all the way up to the north of Africa and on to the Arabian Peninsula. So it's a much more extensive genus. But the Gasterias are a delightful group in and of themselves, and this is one of the larger ones, Gasteria acinacifolia. It means scimitar leaves, because the way that the leaves kind of have a little bit of an arc to them. They have speckles on the leaves, little spots, and quite large growing for a Gasteria. They really flower more than any time of the year in the spring, but flowers will come out here and there at various times. And as we have gone along and we've got more and more of them as we propagated them, we now have flowers almost any time of the year, and here they are blooming in September. Gasteria acinacifolia. A lot of the aloes come from Africa, but there are a significant number from Madagascar as well. Not as many of these are common in our California gardens because many of them have limited cold tolerance. But here in this bed that's covered in the wintertime, we're able to grow some of the wonderful Madagascar ones like this one. This is Aloe divaricata. Now ours is developed into a clump a few feet tall, but really in habitat they can get quite large. I've seen them taller than me, and that must be a pretty old plant. But they have these branched inflorescences with pinkish red flowers, and generally fall flowering for us here in California. Aloe divaricata. Mexico has many species of echeverias, also called hen and chicks, and they occur in all different parts of Mexico and in different sizes. And hybridizers have really worked with the echeverias a lot, and this is a relatively new hybrid for us here at the Bancroft Garden. It's a hybrid between Echeveria craigiana from northwest Mexico and Echeveria subalpina from eastern Mexico. It's very popular with the bees, and you can't look at it for 1 minute without seeing a bee fly into the picture. And so they've just been working it ever since it started blooming. We have quite a lot of it, and it's new for us, so we're really amazed at how much it flowers. Echeveria craigiana x subalpina. Grevillea is an Australian genus in the Protea family, And there are many species as well as lots of hybrids and cultivars. This one is relatively new to horticulture. Only in the last 10 or 15 years has this been around. And it's called King's Fire, named after King's Park in Perth in Western Australia. And we've been really impressed by it because it's almost non-stop flowering. So it makes it on What's in Bloom quite a lot. Grevillea King's Fire. I mentioned my fondness for yellow-flowered hybrids, and this is another yellow-flowered hybrid that I made some years ago. It's a cross between Aloe laborana from Uganda and Aloe hildebrantii from northern Somalia. Now, neither of those are places that experience a lot of cold in the wintertime, so that's why this aloe is planted where it is in the bed that gets covered in the wintertime for winter protection. But it makes a beautiful display of yellow flowers in the fall. Aloe laborana x hildebrantii. Eucalyptus is a large genus, mostly of trees from Australia, but some of them are smaller growing. And this one, Eucalyptus sheathiana, comes from South Australia. And it's really not a species commonly seen in cultivation, so we're not really sure how big it will get. But it has these wonderful little clusters of white flowers and is blooming right now with more buds higher on the tree, indicating that it's going to keep going for quite some time. Eucalyptus sheathiana. South Africa has a great many species in the ice plant family, Isoaceae, and these are very variable plants, but oftentimes highly succulent and very well adapted to the places where they grow. One of the genera in the Isoaceae is Glottophyllum, and this one here is Glottophyllum oligocarpum. I think Glottophyllums are wonderful. I call them Gumby plants because of these soft, flexible, Gumby-like leaves, and they all have bright yellow flowers, as you can see with this one. This one is just starting blooming now and will bloom on into the fall months. We have other ones that will pick up later in the fall, but quite wonderful plants, Glottophyllum oligocarpum. Our last plant on this month's What's in Bloom is Xantharea quadrangulata. Now the spelling is pretty atrocious on that, but we'll print it on the frame for you to see the spelling of it. But they are called Australian grass trees because in age they can get a considerable trunk and they're like a tuft of grass growing on top of a tall trunk. Well, ours is not that old, does not have a trunk at all, but it has this wonderful inflorescence. So it rises up almost like a cattail, and the upper part of the flower stalk almost looks like green astroturf when it first come out, and then little white stars emerge from the green of the astroturf, and those are the flowers. And it's a pretty slow growing plant, and many, many years before it will get a trunk, but we're happy it's reached a flowering size. Xantharea is now placed in the family Asphodelaceae along with the aloes, but it used to have its own family, Xantheraceae. In any case, wonderful Australian plants, and this one is Xantharea quadrangulata. Well, that brings us to the end of our September What's in Bloom at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. But I always like to remind everybody that there's all sorts of things going on in the garden. Some things bloom quite ephemerally, and things change from day to day, and it's always a wonderful thing to come here and see the garden for yourself. So I encourage you to do that whenever you can.